Next, I paid a visit to Channel 9 local news under the guise of donating honey to their upcoming Taste of the County feature. I knew someone on the inside, my old friend Gracie, who did puff segments on backyard gardens and quirky local businesses. She owed me a favor. I told her the story. Sanitized and sweetened. Local beekeeper mistreated by HOA. Honey stolen. Hives relocated without permission. I kept it calm, factual, and left out the hornets. Gracie lit up. So, you're saying they stole your livestock? She asked, half smiling like she already saw the headline. Basically, I don't want to press charges, I said smoothly. I just want the public to know where their honey's really coming from. She booked an on-location interview. When Karen heard about the news crew arriving, she practically foamed at the mouth with excitement. I watched from a distance as she pried in front of the camera next to my hive boxes, holding a spoonful of my own damn honey and lying through her capped teeth about local sustainability. Gracie, to her credit, played it neutral at first until she asked Karen to explain how bees navigate using polarized light and what species of nectar plants were being planted to support forage diversity. Karen blinked, sweated, laughed nervously, and mumbled something about lavender and stuff. Gracie cut to me, asked the same questions, and I delivered answers so smooth they might as well have been churned butter. When the story aired that night, I became a minor local legend. The honeyman, complete with slow-motion shots of me smoking a hive, cut against Karen's squinting confusion about what pollen actually was. That alone would have satisfied most people, but I wasn't most people. While Karen scrambled to spin the interview and the HOA fumbled their PR response, I began Phase 2 paranoia. I printed a series of fake regulatory signs, high-quality reflective aluminum, the kind used for construction zones, and installed them around the edges of the community garden. They said things like caution, active apiary, authorized beekeepers only, potential anaphylactic zone, and my favorite, insect quarantine zone by anaphylactic zone. Violators subject to sting. I didn't need to scare the whole neighborhood, just the right 5 people. And it worked. Within a week, 3 HOA members stopped showing up to garden volunteer shifts. Someone sent an email about children's safety. Karen issued a new directive requiring all visitors to wear approved protective headgear when near the hives. I laughed so hard I nearly cracked a rib. That's when I knew they were primed for the real sting. You see, I've been working on a side project for about a year now. Not because I'm evil, but because I'm curious, deeply curious, and maybe a little vindictive. Through a USDA loophole intended for pollination research, I'd secured a license to import Vespa mandarinia, the Asian giant hornet. Yes, those hornets, the ones tabloids call murder hornets. My permit was tight. Display purposes only. Controlled enclosure, no release, no breeding. But I'd found a way to work within the edges of legality. My friend Marcus at the entomology department owed me a favor, and his lab had 4 hornets in a containment greenhouse where I'd been volunteering. I observed them, fed them tree sap and beetle paste, and learned what made them tick and buzz and kill. The secret was pheromone tagging. I won't go into detail, but let's just say murder hornets don't like other bees. They can smell colonies from miles away if you tag the boxes with just the right amino profile, a chemical signature derived from crushed drone brood. Think of it like a breadcrumb trail for apex predators. With gloves, full gear, and absolute precision, I applied those breadcrumbs to the undersides of the hive boxes the HOA stole from me. It took 2 late-night trips, no lights, and a lot of stealth, but I did it. Then the night before the HOA's Lavender Lux Neighborhood Farmers Market Showcase, complete with tents, flyers, and a local influencer live stream scheduled, I opened the containment cage. I'd built a disguised apiary shelter near the old greenhouse plot, just on the other side of the neighborhood fence. The hornets emerged slowly, their huge amber eyes glinting in the moonlight. I'd placed a single baited hive on a stand, primed with the same pheromones as the HOA hives. They hovered, investigated, and then took off, following the scent trail I'd laid. I didn't direct them. I didn't push them. I just opened the door and let nature correct itself. By morning, the hornets had relocated themselves into the heart of Lavender Oaks. The timing was perfect. The murder hornets had taken up residence in one of the stolen boxes, and the HOA had no clue. They were too busy arranging their custom-branded tablecloths and honey jar labels, setting up lawn chairs and photo booths. Karen wore a sash. A sash. She was giddy. convinced that the rebranded hives were going to be the crown jewel of her new HOA social media campaign. From comb to community, she told the cameraman. I just watched from a distance, sipping coffee, smiling like a man who'd finally found the sweet spot between madness and justice. The stage was set, the players were in place, the Hornets were home, and the real show hadn't even started yet. The morning of the Harvest Festival dawned bright and unreasonably cheerful, like the universe was daring me to interrupt its perfect suburban pageant. Birds chirped from chemically sterilized oak trees. Balloons bobbed on white string above lawn signs that read, Lavender Luxe, a taste of home. Fold-out tables lined the park's main walking path, covered in lavender pattern cloth. And a big rented banner stretched across the HOA's tent that read, From hive to home, taste the buzz, my hives, my honey. My rage had fermented into something sticky and sweet and dangerously calculated, and now it was time to harvest what they'd sown. I stood across the green, shaded by a utility shed, sipping coffee from a thermos and watching it all play out like a nature documentary. Karen was in full queen bee mode, fluttering around in a pastel purple dress with a matching sash that read Community Director, Apiary Ambassador. She wore white gloves and a sun hat with a net veil, clearly purchased last minute from a costume store that didn't understand real beekeeping equipment. Behind her, the HOA's display featured stacked crates of neatly labeled honey jars with embossed tags. Lavender Luxe Local Raw Honey, Maple Grove Collective. My heart twisted when I saw the label design. They had copied my original typography down to the swirl on the L. I could even recognize the glass jars from my original inventory, probably still full of my honey scraped from my stolen combs. To the side of the display, Karen had arranged 3 hive boxes repainted in HOA colors for the educational beekeeping experience. She'd added cartoon decals of smiling bees and tied pastel bows to the corners like she was prepping a nursery. I could see the Hornets even from where I stood, sluggish in the morning cold, but nestled deep inside the center box. The Vespa Mandarinia were massive, even compared to regular Hornets, 2 in long, with orange helmets for heads and black armored bodies that shimmered like oil slicks. They were still quiet, still calm, still adjusting to the scents and vibrations of their new territory. But they were there, and the clock was ticking. As the crowd gathered, so did the pressure. Kids ran across the lawn with juice boxes. People pointed and cooed at the educational hives. A toddler poked the bottom board with a stick while his mother sipped something from a branded HOA wine tumbler and smiled vacantly. The temperature crept upward. So did the sunlight. So did the foot traffic. I watched one of the Hornets crawl out of the entrance hole, twitch its antenna, and return inside. Another soon followed, dragging a wad of chewed wax and larvae casing from the old bee nest Karen had stolen. They were claiming territory, making it their own. Inside that box, they were dismantling the remnants of my former colony and replacing it with their own. Murder Hornets didn't just occupy bee nests. They gutted them, rewired them, dominated them. They didn't pollinate, they conquered. By 10:15 a.m., the first signs of alarm started showing on the faces of the volunteer dozen Karen had recruited. A teenager in a tie-dye shirt and lanyard was swatting at something aggressively near the entrance box. One of the kids cried after being stung on the leg, not fatally, but enough to ruin his morning. Karen rushed over with a first aid kit and a camera-ready smile, assuring the family it was just a regular honeybee, even though the welt was the size of a ping-pong ball. She offered the kid a free jar of honey and posed for a photo. The Hornets didn't like flashes. They didn't like squealing toddlers. They didn't like Karen's flowery perfume, which she'd proudly announced to the camera crew as Jasmine Pollinator No. 5. At 10:37 a.m., the first swarm emerged. It started like a whisper, a low-frequency hum so deep it vibrated through the soil. One hornet launched from the hive, circling overhead. Another followed, then 5 more. They weren't disoriented. They were scouting. They hovered in a slow spiral above the table, flicking their wings in short bursts like black helicopters made of nightmare and hatred. People looked up, laughed, pointed, and then one of them landed directly on Karen's shoulder. Time slowed. Her face froze in a smile so tight it looked like it had been Botoxed into place. She didn't move at first, trying to keep her composure for the nearby Channel 9 livestream. But the second she felt the sting, the scream that came out of her throat wasn't human. It was the scream of someone realizing they were not at the top of the food chain anymore. Karen flailed backward, smacking at her shoulder, tearing her sash in half. The hornet held fast, plunging its stinger through fabric and into flesh like a branding iron. She staggered, spun, and fell face first into a crate of glass jars, sending honey splattering across the display like shattered amber. That was the cue. The remaining hornets erupted from the hive like a volcanic plume, a writhing cloud of segmented fury that broke through the crowd with the intensity of a fire alarm. People ran. Children screamed. A stroller overturned. A man in cargo shorts grabbed 2 lemonade jugs and used them as makeshift shields, abandoning his chuo cart mid-sail. 2 of the hornets landed on the Pomeranian Karen had tied to a lawn chair beside her booth. It yelped once, tried to escape, and promptly rolled into a snow cone stand. That's when the real panic started. HOA board members dove for cover behind tables and trash cans. One of them leapt head first into the community pool, fully clothed, knocking over a display of gluten-free zucchini muffins on his way. The gazebo collapsed under the weight of fleeing parents and boomers wearing lawn loafers. Someone knocked over a propane grill. Flame shot upward. A beach ball caught fire. The scent of burning polyester mixed with smoke, lavender, and terror. I watched it all from behind the utility shed, sipping the last of my coffee. Across the lawn, a swarm of hornets had surrounded a cotton candy machine. The volunteer operating it screamed and ran, leaving the machine spinning unattended, launching strands of sugar into the air like pink spiderwebs. That's when the police showed up. Sirens blared as 2 squad cars skidded onto the grass, nearly hitting a discarded bounce house. Officers jumped out, yelling for people to stay calm. One of them drew his weapon until the other shouted, "Don't shoot the hornet, Steve." EMTs rushed to the scene. I watched as they loaded Karen into an ambulance, her arms swollen to the size of a loaf of bread and her perfect sun hat hanging limply off one ear. She was hyperventilating, muttering about bioengineered bees and chemical warfare. The camera crew caught all of it. The live stream didn't cut. It went viral within 20 minutes. Murder hornets invade HOA festival trended regionally on social media. Channel 9 did a follow-up interview with the wildlife control officer who arrived in a hazmat suit. He held up one of the hornets with tongs and calmly explained, "These are not regular bees. These are Vespa mandarinia native to parts of Asia. Extremely dangerous. This is now a biohazard site." He turned to the reporter and said, "This isn't negligence. This is an ecological nightmare." The HOA tried to spin the story, of course. Claimed the hives were tampered with. Claimed sabotage. Claimed I'd somehow snuck in and planted killer insects out of spite. But the damage was already done. In under an hour, their rebranded honey empire had collapsed under the weight of their own ignorance and arrogance. The neighborhood was temporarily shut down. Hazmat crews moved in. The festival was canceled. The HOA was placed under emergency review and Lavender Oaks became the top trending Google search in the county for all the wrong reasons. And as I walked back home, the last of the hornets circling high overhead like avenging angels, I couldn't help but smile because justice doesn't always wear a badge. Sometimes it has wings and a 2-inch stinger. They tried to bury me in honey, but all they did was feed the queen. Within 48 hours of the hornet outbreak, Lavender Oaks went from an HOA-run model suburb to a federally flagged biohazard site with caution tape draped across cul-de-sacs like a crime scene. 3 ambulances, 7 emergency room visits, 1 televised meltdown, and a burned-down cotton candy booth. Later, the state came knocking, not gently either. The Department of Agriculture sent in a full-blown invasive species team in hazmat suits. The local wildlife control authority was livid. The county sheriff was confused, and the mayor was caught on camera saying, "I didn't even know hornets could do that." Turns out when you accidentally create a perfect breeding zone for one of the most dangerous invasive species in North America, people take it personally. The story made the front page of the Chronicle under the headline, "Suburb Stung by Its Own Hoe. Murder Hornets Found in Community Honey Farm." And it only got better from there. The investigation peeled back Lavender Oaks like the wax capping on a spoiled frame. Every hidden bylaw, every underhanded vote, every phony citation came tumbling out into the light. Turns out Karen had been operating well outside the bounds of her position for months, breaking and entering. Confirmed multiple times. Illegal relocation of livestock. Slam dunk. She hadn't just moved my hives. She'd falsified inspection records and authorized the transportation of live bees without a permit. When the Department of Agriculture asked to see the transport documentation, she handed over a print out of the HOA newsletter with a post-it that said, "Approved" on it. It took every ounce of self-control not to laugh during that deposition. The state's agricultural code was on my side. Beekeeping is not just legal in most rural counties, it's protected. I had a laminated copy of the Right to Farm Act on my fridge. Karen, on the other hand, had a trail of emails showing she'd plotted the hive heist down to the hour, enlisting 2 board members and a landscaping intern named Tyler, who thought he was just helping move some garden supplies. When Tyler testified nervously, sweating through his HOA polo, he said, "I didn't know they were alive. She said they were decorative boxes. I thought we were making like art." Oh, Tyler. My lawsuit hit the county courthouse like a smoker full of pine needles. Theft of livestock, illegal seizure of agricultural property, destruction of licensed apiary assets, emotional distress, loss of income, and my personal favorite, malicious misuse of community funds for personal branding. My lawyer, Sheila, almost cried when she saw the case file. "This is the juiciest suburban takedown I've seen in a decade," she said. "We're going for the throat." And we did. I had footage, photos, expert witness statements, a published article on pollination law from the university, and most importantly, I had receipts, literal invoices showing the HOA had profited from the illegal sale of my stolen honey under their bogus Lavender Lux label. By the time we filed for damages, Karen was already neck-deep in subpoenas. The trial was short. Her lawyer tried to argue that I had deliberately introduced dangerous insects into a public space, but I didn't have to defend myself. The Hornets had moved in after the hives were stolen. No one could prove I planted them. I never touched the Hornets once they left the lab. I simply let natural instinct do the work. Meanwhile, Karen's digital footprint told a different story. Her emails were packed with statements like, "We'll take control of the honey before he realizes, and this is our chance to turn that BuzzFreak's mess into a real brand." The phrase BuzzFreak made it into the court transcript. I had that printed and framed. The jury found in my favor in under an hour. Karen was fined for breaking and entering, theft of livestock, destruction of agricultural infrastructure, and public endangerment. The city issued a separate fine for biohazard negligence. Her husband, who'd sat silently through the entire trial with the expression of a man being slowly digested by regret, filed for divorce 2 weeks later. Moved out of the HOA president's house and into a modest 1-bedroom apartment behind the Ace Hardware. Karen's frozen smile cracked during her sentencing hearing. She gave a weepy press conference in front of her destroyed community garden, but it didn't land. Not when 3 ER patients were still recovering from allergic reactions, and someone's kid had developed a lifelong fear of anything that buzzed. Meanwhile, HOA meetings turned into cage matches. Half the neighborhood voted to disband the organization entirely. The other half voted to permanently bar Karen from any community leadership roles. They agreed on one thing. I should take over the community garden. I didn't say yes right away. I let them sweat. Then I made a proposal. We turned the garden into a certified pollinator sanctuary. No more lavender monocultures and no more HOA honey scams. Instead, we planted native flowers, taught kids how to build bee hotels, and introduced safe, sustainable hives back into the landscape. Not murder hornets, not carnelians, just regular old Italian Apis mellifera, calm, reliable, and legal as fresh grass. I installed educational plaques around the area, held weekly classes on pollination, queen rearing, and the importance of biodiversity. Kids who once ran screaming from a single wasp now carried sketchbooks, drawing worker bees mid-flight. I even started a scholarship fund for young entomologists using the settlement money Karen had to pay me. It felt good, like closing a circle. But my favorite part, the sign. I had it carved from cedar and placed at the entrance to the new sanctuary, right where Karen's Lavender Lux banner once hung. It wasn't fancy, just a simple inscription burnt into the wood with a branding iron I made myself. Don't steal what you can't handle. I visit it every few days, check the hives, talk to the kids, sip my coffee, and watch the butterflies play tag across the wildflowers. Sometimes when the sun hits just right, I see a single shadow drift across the sign, a hornet, slow and steady, landing on the edge like a punctuation mark, just watching, just reminding. The past never really leaves us. But if you play your cards right, it might just sting your enemies instead. Advice for you after this story. Stay calm and use knowledge as your weapon. In any confrontation, especially when it involves your personal rights and legal matters, staying composed and understanding the law is your greatest strength. Prepare your evidence carefully, maintain a professional attitude, and persist in pursuing justice. Know how to stand up for your rights. Don't let others control your life or property illegally. Whether in a small community or a bigger environment, protecting your legitimate rights is necessary and nothing to be ashamed of. Be creative and wise in problem solving. Sometimes, the best solution isn't direct confrontation. Using intelligence, tact, and sometimes a bit of strategy can help you turn a disadvantage into an advantage. Respect the environment and biodiversity. Taking care of nature and nurturing the ecosystem is a shared responsibility. Promote sustainable methods and avoid actions that harm the environment or other living creatures. Value community and cooperation. Even though the story has conflicts, ultimately building a better, more united community brings lasting and positive results. Would you like me to help you customize or expand this advice further?